Patriots select Drake May.
He's got the ball, and that's the ball game.
Good afternoon, Tuesday, September the 2nd, 1:47 in the afternoon. You are watching the All 32 podcast with yours truly, Mike Giardi. We, of course, are brought to you by the #1 daily fantasy sports app in North America. That, of course, is Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off your first $5. Prize Picks, run your game. This podcast, by the way, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network and our Hefe, John Zannis. So interesting show for you today. Going to streamline this thing on the Patriots. 4 thoughts about the Patriots as they get ready to head into week 1's matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders at home, 1:00 kickoff at Gillette Stadium. First, have to start with what I think is the most immediate thing, and that's Christian Gonzalez's injury. He was hurt on July 28th, covering an underneath route, a crosser from Stephon Diggs in training camp. I believe that was day 5 of training camp, and maybe the second day where they really started to go at it during training camp. He has not practiced since. Again, now it's September 2nd, so we're talking basically 5 weeks without practicing. I know he's doing stuff behind the scenes, but when it comes to what we've seen on the football field, we see a guy who's not in uniform. We see a guy who's not participating in anything, and that is obviously of great concern because he is your blue chipper. You're unquestioned, no doubt. This is going to be your best player on defense. This is going to be the guy who's going to break the contract record for cornerbacks if he continued to play like he did last year in Christian Gonzalez. And here we are on Tuesday, and he hasn't practiced in all this time. I thought it was very interesting when we heard from Mike Vrabel yesterday, and Vrabel was asked about his availability. Will we see him? No, we didn't see him on Monday. So the next big day, obviously, depending on when you're listening to this, is going to be Wednesday. The Patriots will reconvene after having Tuesday off to practice. If he doesn't practice on Wednesday, my guess is there's no shot we're going to see him on Sunday. I'm already leaning in that direction anyway, not through anything that I have been told by the Gonzalez camp or even from the Patriots internally, but just listen to how Mike Vrabel talked yesterday. And I want to read you the quote when he was going through the whole thing. Hey, look, we want to make sure that when he's out there that he feels confident in the leg, that he can do all the things that he wants to do. There's also a conditioning aspect to this. As he said a couple of weeks ago, you can only ride the bike for so long, right? You actually have to go out there and practice football in order to play football. And when he was asked about Gonzalez, because if you remember correctly, people, the initial report from Jordan Schultz, which is usually a bunch of happy horse bleep anyway, was that he would be ready for week 1. And then for weeks, I didn't hear anything that made me think differently. But as you start to go on, you wonder. And so yesterday, Andrew Callahan of the Boston Herald asked Mike Vrabel point blank, well, has there been a setback? And it's how Vrabel said it, not so much what he said, that makes you believe that this just isn't going the way that they thought it was going to. And he said, well, it just hasn't gone, as I just paraphrased him, but that's what he said. Well, it just hasn't gone. And then there was a pause as if he realized I'm about to say yes to a setback, and that's not really where I want to go. So he said, regather. Again, he's working hard, and whether it's, again, we can say one injury is going to be 3 to 4 weeks, one is going to be 1 to 2. Everybody heals differently. So just making sure when the players are back, they can do their job with confidence, they can protect themselves on the field, and that they can't make it any worse. Those are some of the things I try to use as guidelines for when players are ready to play and get back there. And I don't know how you can say Christian Gonzalez, even though, we know his supreme talent at the cornerback position, would feel comfortable and confident about playing football when he hasn't done it, which is why I think Wednesday and I guess Thursday could be the last day where you're like, okay, if he's out there practicing, maybe he does have a chance. But to me, I think you take a big picture view with this scenario. If it has been reluctant to heal at the rate that they initially thought, and I think that's why Mike made the point about 3 to 4 weeks for one guy, 1 to 2 for another. It's also, just as a sidebar, why I generally don't like to get into timetables with injuries either, because I think it's a lot of speculation. I've seen people do it a million times, and it drives me crazy with concussions. Oh, well, they think he'll be back this week. Do we not pay attention to this stuff? Like, you could push it one day and you wake up the next day and it just doesn't feel right. And then all the projections and, oh, is there something wrong with the player? Does he not want to play? No, this is why you have to be careful with the projections, because I don't think you want to put it on a player who is not, through any fault of his own, on the sidelines and wants to be out there. And I think people get into that game. And I think there's been some of that with Gonzalez at this point about, well, does this have something to do with the contract? And Sauce Gardner last year was sort of reluctant tackler and didn't have the kind of year that you anticipate for someone of that level, but then he got his contract. And by all accounts, this summer has been awesome for the Jets. Like, if you could put money down on Sauce Gardner having a big year, I think this is the key. So people start to immediately project that on Gonzalez, and the hamstring, the brain, all these different things, you just can't predict how they're going to heal. So I've seen him put in time with treatment. He's been engaged. He took the 2 road trips with the team, even though he wasn't participating, wasn't practicing. So I think those are all good signs. It's just a matter of take the long view here. How many times have we seen a guy rush back from something, be it a hamstring, quad, calf, whatever, and then all of a sudden pop, strain. And now instead of missing maybe 1 more week, had they just played it safe, they're out for 8 weeks. And then when they do come back, are they really the same guy? I think those are the things you have to look at in the long view here. He's an important asset for you. Yes, you want him to play as many games as humanly possible. It just may be a situation where be smart with your best talent on defense and make sure that he's ready to go. And hopefully, if it's not this week, you get him for next week when you go down to South Florida, and we can say what we want about Miami. And I don't have great expectations for this Miami team. I think they're a team in flux. They still have Tua, who, when he's throwing on time, is throwing to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And Mike McDaniel will have some wrinkles to start the year. Whether he can carry them over into December is a whole nother story. But give me 100% Christian Gonzalez for week 2 versus some ifs and question marks for week 1 here against the Raiders. The Raiders don't have someone on the outside that really necessarily scares you as much. I mean, their best receiver is their tight end in Brock Bowers. So sort of where I'm at with the Gonzalez injury. Again, check back on my Twitter at Mike Giardi. Check on Boston Sports Journal, where I wrote about Gonzalez on Monday, and where I'm sure we'll be updating you on Wednesday as to his participation level, if he participates at all in practice on Wednesday. And again, that being to me a key day. If he can't go, Alex Austin had low-key maybe the best camp of anybody on defense. Like, I'm not kidding you. 3rd-year pro, cut from Buffalo, has played some time with the Patriots at various points, but has had some injury issues, but has been sort of a reserve, but has shown some promise when he's been in there. I thought he had an awesome summer. I'm not talking about like Christian Gonzalez breakout summer, or even, what you expect from someone like Carlton Davis, who's been doing it for a long time and doing it at a fairly high level on the other side. I'm just saying, like, he took a step this summer, a real step forward, got a ton of reps with the ones because of the injuries to Gonzalez and to Davis, who, the first couple of weeks of camp wasn't very useful, if you will, in that regard. And I think he benefited a ton from it. And maybe not facing the greatest passing attack in the world in Drake May and some of the receivers that the Patriots have, but still a really good challenge for him. And I thought he answered it every day. I thought he made plays every day. I think he'll give some up. I think most corners do. In fact, I think all corners do. I think we have a twisted view of how the cornerback position is played. But I really thought he had an awesome summer. I think he's playing very confidently. And so if they have to go to him, I feel comfortable with that. And then, of course, is DJ James, who, as Mike Vrabel shouted out on Monday, probably one of their most improved players from the spring through the summer. Undrafted free agent. This is year 2. Was picked by Seattle in the 7th round, was cut before training camp finished last year, or maybe right at the cut down date. Patriots picked him up, had him on the practice squad, did not play for them last year, but another guy who really benefited from the extra reps and the challenge of facing the Patriots' top receiving crews, and extremely confident kid. So I would imagine that it's Austin who would be the first crack at starting for Gonzalez. I don't even imagine it would be. And then DJ James would probably be the next guy to come in. Austin can also slide down in the slot if they want to have a bigger slot to replace Marcus Jones in that situation. But so that's just something to look at with the Patriots and how it might project out on Sunday against Vegas without Christian Gonzalez, if that's the case. Not much to add on this next topic, Jabrill Peppers, in terms of the deal. I think a lot of people are trying to find answers as to what happened because they look at the PFF grades, or even, where he was just 2 weeks ago with the starting unit, and say, like, this doesn't make any sense. There had to be something that happened, a clash with a coach, or bucking at his role, or, was it the scheme? I just want to say, again, I'm going to quote Vrabel here, because he was asked if it was a scheme issue. And it's something I was told when the move went down on Friday, when the Patriots released Peppers, that it had nothing to do with scheme. And then when I said, well, is it an off-field thing? And they said, no, his attitude's been good. So again, like, they could be, I'm taking them at their word, is what I'm saying. But Vrabel was asked about the scheme thing, and he said, no, I don't think that was certainly not the issue. There's a lot of reasons. I wouldn't say that that's, and then he pauses. We're going to do what we can for the best of the team. We've got a lot of different schemes that we can run in all three phases, special teams, offense, and defense. And so there's a lot that goes into it. Again, we're just trying to build towards Sunday here, and that's our focus. And again, that's a decision that we made to make, again, wish the best for Jabrill. Jabrill took to Twitter sometime after his release. I don't know what day it was, and was like, I've played for X amount of defensive coordinators and head coaches, and the scheme has never been a problem. I don't think it's a massive issue either. I don't think he's the perfect fit for the scheme. But if you're telling me I can have Jabrill Peppers for 60 plays on defense or something close to it, or Jalen Hawkins, I'm going to take Peppers. And I know there may have been some concerns internally about Peppers' legs, his change of direction ability. And so maybe they started to see some age things. I thought he was perfectly fine this summer. He banged up his hip prior to the Minnesota preseason game. So that was week 2, didn't play in that game. Then, of course, played in the third game, which raised some eyebrows because a lot of guys did not play in that game. A lot of starters got the day off. He didn't. I kind of looked at it like, I raised an eyebrow for sure, but I was thinking, okay, well, he didn't play in game 2. Maybe they want to see him get some game reps with Woodson. Turns out that wasn't what they were trying to do, or it doesn't feel like they were trying to do, because when they came back, and as Mike Reese and Paul Perillo as my witnesses, as we sat on the hill, we saw him run out with the second team, playing with Del Pettis or playing with Kyle Duggar. Again, Duggar, a second teamer at this point, and someone who's been on the scout team. And we kind of looked at each other and were like, we had him as a lock. Now we might have to reconsider. And then sure enough, 4 days later, it's a surprise release because it came after the cutdown day. But I guess we kind of saw maybe there was some potential here. I have one other feeling about this, in that they tried to move Duggar and tried to get someone to take as much money as humanly possible on that contract. Nobody really wanted the contract and didn't want to take much of it, if at all. And so to me, that also raised a red flag in my head. Well, if they can't move him and his $15 million, will they try to move Peppers and his contract? I talked to multiple league sources who said his name wasn't out there. I know Reese reported there was at least one team that said the name was out there. So you got to believe they didn't just cut him willy-nilly and not at least pick up the phone and say, hey, you were talking about Duggar. How would you feel about Peppers? So again, if anything new comes up to this story, we will have it for you here on the All 32 pod, or of course on Boston Sports Journal, or on my Twitter. Moving on to how confident they feel in Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson, I'll tell you, they love Woodson. 4th round pick really kind of was the one pick that up until they decided to pick specialists, a long snapper and a kicker, that made you scratch your head. Was they had the whole night, because it was a day 3 pick. It's their first pick in that round, whatever, 8th overall pick in the 4th round or something to that extent. So they had the whole night to sit on that pick, field offers, do whatever they wanted, and they were steadfast. They wanted Craig Woodson. He's an older rookie. He's 24, played a lot of football at Cal. And I think I said it since the spring. He's very calm. He seems to be in the right place all the time. The one reservation I have about him thus far is that I haven't seen him make a lot of plays on the football. And I think at some point, as a safety, and for a team that wants to pride themselves on being able to take the ball away, he's going to have to do that. But it feels as though he has handled everything they've thrown at him. Vrabel mentioned his overall athleticism, the range that he has on the field, which I think was sort of a subtle dig at Duggar and Peppers, or not even a dig, but just like, hey, he does this, those guys can't. And, and we parted ways with one of them. And certainly I think if someone wanted Duggar, they could come get him, and he wouldn't be on the roster either. So having him and Hawkins play side by side, they've done it a lot the last couple of weeks. I look at Hawkins as a 6-year vet. To me, he's a mid player. And I don't say it as an insult. I don't think he's a net negative. I don't think he does anything poorly. I thought last year I was a little concerned about him being in the box at times. And then I think he showed up and played with that violence that this coaching staff talks about. But he was a physical player last year, and maybe not to the extent of a Duggar or Peppers, but he did a nice job with it. So I think he's fine in that role. As a deep safety, I think he's fine in that role. His range isn't awesome. I don't think his range is as good as Woodson's, but he seems to be in the right place. And with the way they're going to play defense in the secondary this year, and Vrabel, there's a lot of quarters talk, which they're going to play a lot more quarters, and there's man matching in that aspect of it. But I think there's a GTF. How do you say that? Get the bleep back. You know what I'm trying to say. They don't want to get beat deep, and I think that they trust Hawkins if he's out there playing a third, a half, that they're not going to get behind him, that he's smart enough to not allow that happen. Del Pettis obviously will work into the mix, as I assume Duggar will in week one, although I should say I'll pump the brakes on that a little bit. Maybe he's a healthy and active. I don't know. A little too early to get into that. But so I'm a little lukewarm on Hawkins. I like the potential of Woodson. I've liked it since we saw him in the spring. I thought he was their best rookie period in the spring. Even with Trevion Henderson, and Henderson obviously kind of blew everybody away this summer, but there's some confidence in there that the veteran in Hawkins, Woodson will be able to lean on him, but that Woodson is smart enough to be able to handle all the responsibilities that they're going to throw at him. As I mentioned at the top of this program, Prize Picks, and what a time of year for Prize Picks. We got baseball playoffs coming up, and we got pennant races going on like crazy. If you're a basketball fan, women's basketball is going on, soccer, the Premier League, all these different leagues have started. You can cross all these sports when you play Prize Picks, which encourages you to pick between 2 and 6 players, more or less, on stat projections. Like you go into a Red Sox game and say, I'll tell you what, I think that Pate Toley is going to be awesome. I think he's not going to give up more than 2 runs. And you look at the thing, they've got that. You take the less on that. You combine it with, Caitlin Clark's coming back. And how many 3-pointers is she going to hit? And then when we get the football season coming into it, are you big on Trevion Henderson? As I mentioned, I kind of am. So we'll see. Maybe there are some numbers there that you want to add together. And you do that, and it gives you an opportunity to win up to 2,000 times your cash, right? So between 2 to 6 players, more or less, to win up to 2,000 times your cash. That's kind of insane. Obviously, do it. Be smart with it. Got to make sure that you can afford to lose it. You don't want to be that guy or gal. So just download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get 50 off your first $5. Again, download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get 50 off your first 5. Prize Picks, run your game. As I promised at the beginning, I'll promise you now, I will have picks later in the week, my Prize Pick selections. And I'll focus a little bit more on the Patriots, but there'll be some league picks as well for you. Let's go to our third thing, and that's the Micah Parsons trade. Okay, now we know he didn't go to the Patriots. He went to the Green Bay Packers, a 2026 first-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick, and then 29-year-old defensive tackle Kenny Clark. The ridiculous stuff coming out of Jerry Jones's mouth about why he made the trade, and Kenny Clark, we can stop the run. Kenny Clark, Kenny Clark, really good player, all pro, I believe, at one point. Close to 30 than he is to 29. And last year, not his best year. So it could be he's coming down the other side of the hill. Still a good player. Don't get me wrong. He'll help Dallas, just not as much as Micah Parsons would. That clearly became a personal thing. But I want to get to the Patriots' point of view on this thing. And I want to call up, again, as I'm quoting Vrabel a lot here today, but I want to call up Mike Vrabel from his interview on WEEI on Tuesday morning on the Greg Hill Show. They do their Patriots Mondays. It happened to be on a Tuesday this week because of the holiday. So I'm just going to read you. They talked about, were you guys in on Micah Parsons? Vrabel said, we continue to have conversations about all players that are available. Great player, but that wasn't something that we really invested a lot of time or resources in. I think when you just try to look at where we feel like is best for us right now, that wasn't entertaining that specific transaction. Now, I know you're saying, how can you not consider a 26-year-old player that I guess you could say now kind of maybe went for below market value or below what you thought he might go for. Now, granted, he signed a massive contract that's at least $120 million guaranteed. And if you listen to the agent, David Muguleta, maybe all of it's really guaranteed. I haven't seen the full crunching of the numbers because I've been too locked in on the Pat stuff, but that's a lot of cash in addition to the picks. And remember, when you sign a player and you give him guaranteed money, it's in the contract. The owners have to put, I believe it's 80% of that money in escrow. It might even be 100, but I think it's for some reason in my head right now, I'm thinking it's 80. That's a lot of cash to have on hand. 80 of 120 million, 90 million, something of math, not my 93 million, 94 million, somewhere in there. That seems about right at 80%. That's a lot of money to put away. And I've said this before on this podcast and other places that Robert Kraft was still complaining 2 years after the big spending spree in 2021 when they signed Judon and Bourne, all those guys. Remember, it was like at that point, I think it was the second highest or most highest ever in free agent dollars. I think the Patriots actually eclipsed that this past offseason. But point being, he didn't love it. And now he spent a lot of money this offseason as well. Milton Williams, that's a lot of cash. Carlton Davis, that's a lot of cash. They didn't hesitate. I know they have a lot of cap room, but they didn't hesitate to spend money this offseason. And so now you're asking on top of that, do you do this? Vrabel was asked a follow-up to that question, generational player that you could get a bargain price. And he said, yeah, maybe bargain price. I think we just have to be very smart on building this thing. And I hope that everybody else sees it the same way outside of here. We want to bring in the players that we feel like give us the best chance, but also we have to build some depth here on the roster. And you do that from the draft. It hasn't been, we'll call it what it is. It hasn't been real great. Suffice to say, right? 2020 draft, washout. 2022 draft, washout. 2024, two guys on IR, and Marcellus Dial and Jalen Polk. I don't know that Polk's ever going to play football here again. Again, that's season-ending IR. And then the two guys that made the roster are Drake May, obviously, that's a hit, and Caden Wallace, who I thought was going to get cut on cutdown day. I thought when they made moves with the practice squad after that he was going to get cut. And my feeling still is that he is very much the last guy on the roster. So if something comes up, he might be the first guy to go. So it could just be one remaining player active from the 2024 draft. So I think Vrabel makes a great point there. And when you look at the Patriots, and I know there are wild predictions, when the schedule first came out, we heard 13, we heard 12. 10 was a common. The outliers, 11, 12, 13. 10 was a real common number. 10 playoff team. I've been at 7 or 8. We'll do our season predictions at the end of the week. So I can finally settle on a number and give you hardcore what I think is going to happen, at least barring any disasters. What does Micah Parsons do for you? Does he take you from, if you believe internally you're a 7 or 8 win team, does he take you to 10? If you think you're a 9 or 10 win team, does he take you to 11 or 12? You weigh that with the cost you have to give up. And then I think Vrabel made the key point, building depth. When you have washouts in drafts like 20, 22, and 24, and there's a reason you have all the salary cap money, because you didn't have to pay any of those draft picks a second contract because they weren't worth it. And then they did pay some guys last offseason. And as we've seen, most of those guys can be had, or some of them are already gone. 5 guys that got extensions have all been shuffled off. Anthony Jennings, Kyle Duggar have been available. So, not a great place to be. I mean, I guess they got some guaranteed money, but like they might want to rent and not buy, or at least put the house, get it ready for the market. So I think they look at their depth, and it's something we've highlighted a ton this summer, and even back in the spring when everybody was going gaga, was just like, man, there's a lot of spots. Like, look at linebacker. If something happens to Robert Spillane, that's why Jelani Tavai is on the roster, even though he didn't practice the entire summer. They don't really know what Jelani Tavai is in their system, but they could ill afford to take someone with starting experience who 2 years ago was a good player for the Patriots and say, yeah, forget it, you're gone. Like, they just have to build depth. The tight end position, everybody feels comfortable with. Hunter Henry, good player. Austin Hooper, fine number 2. Never added the developmental piece. Jack Westover made the roster. He's not going to be, I don't think, anything to like move those guys off their spot. And now those guys, Hunter and Hooper, are a year older. So that's an area where if something were to happen, especially to Hunter, like there's a downgrade there, and that's a problem. Their cornerback depth, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is probably going to get tested if Gonzalez is not there. I actually feel good about that. Safety depth is an issue. 2 years ago, I would have said it was one of their, if not their best position. And now, because of Duggar's decline, Peppers' release, and decline, whatever, I mean, I don't know. I really have no idea what to think is the ceiling on that group. I mean, I guess if Woodson is the player that we've seen that starts making plays on the ball, then that's solid. But again, it's a far cry from where they were. And obviously, offensive line, like they barely settled on their 5, right? At left guard, it's going to be Jared Wilson, I think. But that could be a quick hook there if things don't go perfectly. They're trying to limit mental mistakes. Having 2 rookies starting on the left side hasn't been done in 25 years, folks. So there's a reason, again, just like there's a reason why We talk about Will Campbell's arm length and all that stuff. There's a reason why for 25 years, a team didn't go into week one on purpose and say, we're starting two rookies side by side. Just it's curious. So I never had a problem with it going to get Parsons. I would make the argument that even though Parsons was the best of the three available players, and I say available in quotations because Terry McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson ended up staying in their places, Cincinnati and Washington respectively, that McLaurin probably made the most sense for this team. But even then, there was a point in the spring where I said, yeah, give up a first-round pick for him. Like, it can make a huge difference. And then I was like, he's going to be 30, third week of September. Like, if you could get him for a second and a seventh, maybe. Like, but it just – and then you got to pay him again. So it's just this is the right way to go about it. It's just we're so damn impatient. And when you see names like that, you get all excited, and I get it. I mean, I'm not telling you they wouldn't be a lot better if they had Micah Parsons screaming off the edge. I mean, he'd be 15 sacks, especially if Milton Williams and Christian Barmore can play to their potential this year and what their contracts say they're going to. But that's a high price to pay. And I think Vrabel basically is telling you, like, we're just not quite there yet. And I think that's why you've heard other people who were gung-ho playoff people in the last 10 days or so from the media perspective sort of reel that back in. You know, got a little too excited, saw it on the field. Yeah, there's some good talent here. The roster is better than it's been. You feel better about the wide receiver room than you have in 5 or 6 years. Not to say it's great, but it's better. You believe in Drake's potential. You know this is a good coaching staff. You like the head coach in particular. You're familiar with the offensive coordinator for 20 years, right? As he takes another tour of duty here. But they still need to me, they're an offseason away. One more offseason. Like, they had a solid year this year. Capitalize on your draft picks again, spend a little money in free agency, and next year, there's no reason why, if the core of this team doesn't develop the way you think, that this isn't a team that we're talking about legitimately as a real bona fide playoff contender, and maybe even a team that could, depending on those moves, again, we're forecasting a year into the future, someone that maybe could challenge the Buffalo Bills in their superiority of the AFC East.
Game Time, the best place to get last-minute tickets to all of your favorite sporting events. And this coming Sunday, Patriots versus Raiders in Gillette Stadium. Behind us, $208 is the get-in price right now. That is the all-in price, one of the best features of the Game Time app. There are no fees included. You get your total up front with no surprises at checkout. So head over there right now, get into this Sunday's game. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use code CLNS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today.
Last thing I want to hit before I get out of here, for the new captains. I never write about captains. I didn't write about it on Boston Sports Journal. I think it's kind of overrated, quite frankly. Even though it's a team sport, it's still individuals. You got to put in your work. You got to study your playbook. You got to practice hard. You got to do all these things. And yeah, you can get poked and prodded. And it certainly helps to have a veteran, if you're a young player, kind of show you the way. But I think guys just lead in their own ways. There's some guys that just, the headphones are on pregame. They're not paying attention to anything. They don't care about speeches. This isn't college. This isn't high school. This isn't some rah-rah speeches. I think you've seen Belichick there, some of the stuff there wasn't always these like go get 'em killers, kick their whatever. Like, that's just not how it works in the pro level. But it is interesting, just the clear out. And the Patriots are about 50% roster turnover. And again, I'll tell you a million times, they probably have 10 more guys that need to flip over before this is really the way Mike wants it to be. Some guys that are holdovers that are good players that fit Mike's vision and will stay. But I still think they're a ways away from getting the sort of the full package of how he wants to build the team. But last year's captains were David Andrews, who they released/retired. He had the injury. Peppers, who just got released. Joe Cardona, released. Dietrich Wise, free agent. No attempt to re-sign him. John Jones, free agent. He headed to Washington as well. And then Jacoby Brissett, who signed elsewhere, and there was no desire to bring him back. So all the captains from last year flushed, gone. And quite frankly, no real effort to keep them. In their place, Harold Landry, who of course has great experience with Mike Vrabel, being in Tennessee with him. Robert Spillane, who cut his teeth as a pro football player under Mike Vrabel before going on to find success in Pittsburgh and then Las Vegas. Marcus Jones did surprise me a little bit because I just don't think he's that sort of outward leader type. Drake May, Brendan Schooler, Hunter Henry. So complete changeover. And Mike said he didn't, was asked about it. We didn't make a concerted effort to change over the leadership group and the roster of this team. We just tried to do what's best to the team. Sorry, coach. Not buying it. There was a full-on effort to cleanse this program of the remaining pieces of the Belichick era. Obviously, the disaster that was the Gerard Mayo 1 year thing. They've won 8 games in the last 2 years. There aren't too many guys that you could look at in that locker room that were there during that period of time that you say, that's a foxhole guy for me if you're Mike Vrabel. Now, maybe some guys have proved that to him over the course of the spring and the summer. Marcus Jones might be one of those guys. But in general, I think this is a clear push. And I know they say players voted on this. They say every team will tell you the players vote on the captains. I'm not saying he's not telling the truth on that. I'm sure they all did vote on the captain. In fact, I know they voted on the captains. But does that mean that maybe when the ballot gets a little close, you say, I don't know about that guy right here. Well, he's only 1 vote behind this guy, so let's just flip that. Here you go. I don't know. I'm sure someone will think that I'm crazy or trying to scandalize things. I'm just telling you, they needed the enema. They got the enema, and I think they'll benefit from it going forward. And Mike doesn't want to put it all on those guys because there was a lot that happened, but to me, pretty clear that they wanted to flush as much as humanly possible from the last couple of years out of the system. And that also includes executive VP football operations, Elliot Wolf, and the signings he made. I mentioned all the guys that signed extensions last year that are no longer here. It's 5 guys, 2 more could go in Jennings and Duggar. That's a pretty big bullseye on, and then the draft class of 2024. That's a pretty big bullseye on Elliott's performance over the last year. And now if the draft goes well this year, you'll probably hear whispers that it's Stretch and Cowden and Vrabel. And if it doesn't go well, you see, you kind of saddle us with Elliot Wolf. So feels like Elliot, whether you believe it or not, rightfully so, rightfully or not so, is being put in a position where he can't necessarily win. I know the ownership loves him, but they made Mike Vrabel the head coach, let him bring John Stryker and Ryan Cowden with him. Would not surprise me in the least bit. Don't have any information on this, but if there was something written in one of their contracts that should Elliott not be returning, one of you guys will ascend to the position that he has, and then we don't have to go through the Rooney Rule and that whole sort of thing. But pretty deliberate, I think, attempt to get things different. And quite frankly, they need it to be different. So that is my view here on the All 32 pod. We'll be back, as I mentioned, at the end of the week to kind of give you a season overview. Want to talk a little bit about Drake May in that next episode. I know we spent plenty of time on him over the last year, but just sort of my expectations for May in the 2025-2026 season. For those listening to the show, we ask you to subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. For those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Patriots content. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new video drops. Shout out to the folks over at CLNS. Shout out to Prize Picks for being a wonderful sponsor. Shout out to you for being with me for how long have I prattled on for? A good long time. Appreciate you being here. 33 minutes, 12 seconds. You guys are the best. Please review would be nice. Fresh them up. Give us some nice 5 stars. It'd be great. Don't forget to leave some comments. We're probably going to do some mailbag editions moving forward. So we have some comments, but generally just comments and not questions. So if you want to throw some questions in there, I constantly will be surfing those over the next few weeks to get ready for that episode. So appreciate you all, and we'll see you at the end of the week.